send out the recording after when everything is complete. Mahalo nui, Amber. And so with that, I just wanted to open up and say mahalo to everybody that was involved in this work, especially to you, ʻOhana Fukumitsu. Mahalo for allowing us to watch your story and for sharing that story with us. And you mentioned in both films how this is, Moʻolelo is really just a piece of the long history of Hakipuʻu. And I feel like that's true with everything that we're doing in Hawaii, especially when it comes to iwi kupuna and protection of our wahi kupuna itself. So mahalo nui, and mahalo Justyn and Malia for guiding ʻOhana Fukumitsu and for helping them tell their story. Again, this story is not exclusive to ʻOhana Fukumitsu, which is unfortunate, and we do see this happening across our pai'aina. And so we mahalo you folks for, giving us a glimpse of what the work entails and where we can go with this. With that, I wanted to ask you, Summer and Kōlea, you folks talk a lot about in both of these films, this ability to connect not only with your aina, but your ʻOhana, and that, protecting iwi kupuna doesn't mean that you're separating out your aina from your ʻOhana, and that in fact, it's both inherently symbiotic. And that we know our iwi, once they're buried into our aina, imbues that mana and continues to nourish us both physically and spiritually. And I wanted to mahalo you guys for that message. I think that kind of gets lost in translation sometimes, especially for folks that don't have our native Hawaiian perspective. But the question I wanted to ask you folks is, if Hawaiians lose this ability to connect to our ʻOhana and our aina, from your experience, how do you see that impacting our health and well-being? And you folks kind of touched upon that in the films, but if you folks could elaborate a little bit more for our audience.
Aloha, that's a great question. I think it's a really heavy question to answer. I do think that connection between aina and ʻOhana is so important to the identity of who we are, the core of who we are. I think that's also why this fight and this journey we've been on in Hakipuʻu is so important to us, because I don't want my keiki to lose their connection to this aina that their family has been on for generations. I think that loss would destroy each of them. Mm-hmm. I think that loss of identity and purpose, by not being able to connect back to your aina and your kupuna, by being in that aina where your kupuna also either are in the soil or have farmed that soil. I think the loss of that causes such emotional trauma, and that emotional trauma then affects you physically. It manifests itself in physical ways, and you can end up very sick. So I think it is extremely important that ʻOhanas don't lose that connection to aina and that reciprocal relationship between us as Kanaka and aina.
Yeah, I concur. It goes hand in hand, not only physically but mentally. I think a lot of times Kanaka will almost forget what kupunas have taught. You lose it along the way because of having to switch, transition into a Western job or, a Western world, and you'll forget how to farm, you'll forget how to fish, you'll forget how to feed your family. And, one thing that the kupunas always said is that if you don't work, you don't eat. And for us, that translates to working the land. You have to feel the aina, you have to get your hands and your feet in there. And the purpose of it is to feel secure in what you have, feel satisfied with what you're doing. And, you're more than content when you're doing that. And I see a lot of depressive states of Kanaka when they lose their land, or when they see another family that's doing it. It's like they don't have the ways and means to do it, so they feel almost almost hurt by it because they don't have it. And it's not that they don't have it, it's just that they just have to maybe learn it again. It's in all of us, in all Kanaka. We have that ability to farm, fish, and to be happy with, you know, our fellow Kanaka.
Absolutely. Mahalo, you too. And I do want to kind of expand on that last point that Kōlea had just brought up and really kind of talk about, you know, the idea of us accessing our aina means that we're still able to access, you know, features of our culture and really express ourselves as Native Hawaiians through how we steward our aina, how we care for it. And that kind of, you folks mentioned in the films how there's this tension between how we view aina, how we view stewardship versus how Western property laws are set up. And Kumu, you mentioned in the films that the removal and desecration of these burials is an act of quote unquote final eviction. So could you kind of elaborate more on that disparate treatment between unmarked burials versus cemeteries, or the overall kind of tension that you've experienced as a practitioner in law between Western property perspective versus our Native Hawaiian perspective?
Yeah, so I have to credit actually Hale Aloha Ayao for saying that when you remove iwi kupuna, it's the final eviction, and really it relates to how, you know, as Kanaka, a lot of us lose our ancestral lands, and then we're evicted from those ancestral lands and living on the beach in tents and getting arrested. And then when you look at iwi kupuna, in the, you know, for me, I learned a lot about this through my work as an attorney with, in the past with Native Hawaiian Legal Corporation. The very first case that I litigated had to do with the Hokuli'a development in South Kona and the destruction of over 100 burials to make way for luxury home subdivision and golf courses, and seeing all the bones scatter, you know, littering the ground, and feeling like this hopelessness. And you know, we were representing the families who were lineal and cultural descendants of those iwi. And I remember one of my clients saying that, you know, when the kupuna said, "Bury me there," that's their home, you know, and it's all the way to the core of the earth, to the levalanis, and you can't disturb that. And, you know, and so for me, it's like, okay, like in the Naholowaʻa property, there was a removal of these iwi from their home. And for me, that's why I call it the final eviction, and why it resonates with me, what Hale Aloha said. I think also, you know, I had a direct experience with the Naholowaʻa property. We went to Mihi for what was done there. If Kualoa Ranch wasn't going to do it, we was going to take it upon ourselves to apologize. And we called certain family members who are linked to that Kuleana land, you know, and when I walked on that land, I felt the impact of what happened. I couldn't help but cry. I could see it was the matriarch of that family screaming and saying, "Look at what they've done to us, to our children." And then I saw that Kupuna took me over the canopy of the forest at Hakipu'u, and I saw the bones scattered all over this dirt road on Kualoa Ranch. And she was like, "Get them now," you know, and then Summer came up to me and she said, "You feel them?" I said, "Yes, I understand." You know, and it's in the training that I've received, iwi kupuna protocol training, it's you know, to be exposed to the light is the ultimate desecration. And it's imperative that we return our kupuna back into the aina. And what I've learned too is that when you go into heavily disturbed areas, all you feel is, on some level, you feel that dissonance, you feel the cries. If you have that sensitivity, you just don't feel tethered, just like the Iwi are not tethered and in their home. And if we access their wisdom and their mana, the only way we can do that is if their spirits are at peace and in the land still. And having served, on the Molokai Island Burial Council, I've had to go into environments that have been incredibly disturbed and have to mihi for all those things that have happened. And so when Justyn and I made this film, one of the things, the Reciprocity Project folks asked us was like, oh, why are you using the word homelessness instead of houselessness? And they said, the Aina is our home. Aina is basically land and people together. You can't separate us. So yeah, if you rip the Kūpuna from the Aina, they're homeless. It's not houseless. And when the Hawaiians are without homes, we are homeless, not houseless. And I think that is the real crux of it, the difference between Western understanding. Your home is your land, not just your hale. And your burial place is your hale and your home at the same time. So you cannot really separate that. Mahalo.
Yes, mahalo kumu. And, I really wanted to kind of highlight what she just mentioned on, once we're removed from our homes, we are absolutely homeless. And I think, as we were watching the film, something that kind of stuck out to me a lot was how you folks also try to heal our home, how you folks are trying to navigate through the emotional labor of all of this. And you mentioned, Kumu, how you can feel that kind of pain, that kaumaha in the aina. You can see it in the visions that you're receiving from your kupuna. And for you, Justyn, I guess my question would be, as you're creating these films, as you are hearing these stories, what was kind of your process in trying to really capture the essence of these of this mo'olelo, but also kind of what Kumu Malia was saying was making sure that you're interpreting it correctly, and that the audience that you're going to have them see, or that is going to see these stories, is going to feel the same, maybe not the same pain, but really kind of capture the essence as if they were right there walking with ʻOhana Fukumitsu, with Kumu Malia, and with you. Could you kind of explain that process? Sorry, really long-winded question, but if you could explain your kind of storyboarding and storytelling process.
Yeah, no, mahalo. I think for me, especially with documentary filmmaking, the most important element is pilina, right? To the folks who you're asking to share their story and put it on film. Because, yeah, I think first and foremost, I mean, our stories are sacred, right? And our experiences are sacred. And so when you are gonna go and do that hana of trying to take such a large and complicated mo'olelo and kind of dwindle it down to 13 minutes, making sure that everyone is in agreement on what that essence is, like you said, what the essence of the mo'olelo is, like what is it that is at its core level most important for people to know, because you can't fit every bit of information in an engaging 13-minute film. But the beautiful thing I think that movies and film does is that it allows us to connect on an emotional level and find a level of empathy with the story or the people in the story that connects back to yourself, and in a way, I think that's the beauty of it. Everybody that watches a film brings their own lived experience to that viewing, and therefore takes away something maybe a little bit different than the person next to them, right? And as a filmmaker, you can't necessarily control what everybody is going to feel, nor should you. I think you can just kind of try to be in yourself that what you're putting out or what we're collectively putting out feels right, you know, and that's and part of that is a lot of it is kind of trusting Na'au, right? Kind of for me, my process, a lot of it is taking time to pule, taking time to ask Kūpuna for guidance, taking time to like just, you know, because I don't always have the end vision in mind when I start. It comes through the process of doing the work. And so, you know, a lot of it was like, I didn't necessarily storyboard this project, but a lot of it was sitting down and, you know, talking story with Kōlea folks and Malia guys and trying to understand as much of the story for myself to then identify, you know, the important elements. And then when we actually sit down and record the interviews, you know, a lot of these interviews are an hour or more longer. And so you're just trying to get all of those bites, ideally as concisely as possible, but also with all of the weight and the emotion that the story carries. And then for myself and my process, I think in the editing room is where the story really comes together, because that's where I can like sit with each interview and really listen to all of it and you know, find the right bites and play with the order and a lot of it really is using my na'au and gut to just sense the pace of the story and then, you know, showed them rough drafts and things and tried to get their feedback to see what, you know, what should be added, what should be taken out, what resonates, what doesn't. And I think collectively we come to the product that we all feel is right to put out into the world.
Absolutely. Mahalo nui, Justyn. And, you know, I think the one thing that I keep thinking of, especially talking to Justyn, not only during this panel, but as we've kind of done in preparation is, you know, it's a good reminder that storytelling is an inherent tradition in our culture, especially for Native Hawaiians, and that, you know, we wouldn't be able to connect to our history if we wouldn't have this storytelling ability. And Justyn has shown us, you know, how that's evolved, how that, how can we create and really amplify the voices at a greater scale. And, you know, seeing it on screen really gives us a good reminder of we need to see this more. We need to have our stories really amplified, not only across the Pai'aina, but to the world, because, you know, if this shouldn't be a unique thing to us, we should really be able to connect that way. And Justyn's done a great job of doing that, especially with these two films. Another storyteller that I think we should highlight is Navahine. Storyteller in a sense that she is, again, I don't know who was here in the beginning, but she will be taking on the mantle of representing a group of children as they take on the Department of Transportation. Navahine, you know, as a young Kanaka, as someone who has grown up in these movements, in these actions, you know, you mentioned in this climate change lawsuit that you'll be bringing up, how the exposure of iwi kupuna is also due to the coastal erosion that you're seeing. And so what do you see in terms of your kuleana to combat both climate change impacts, for climate change impacts, to protect your wahipana as well as your iwi kupuna, if you don't mind sharing with us?
Sorry. In my family, my brothers and I were raised to understand our responsibility to the land, and we're taught to protect the Aina with all that we have. And because, my parents, grandparents, and ancestors have all fought for our way of life, I feel that as the next generation, it was passed on to me. The responsibility was passed on to me to fight for what needs to be fought for. And as I grow older and listen to more to the words that the people that have fought before me are speaking, I feel that I'm getting a better understanding of what my kuleana as a young kia'i is, and how important it is for me to fight for what I need to fight for, such as our land, our way of life, and our ancestors.
And I just want to add in there, Navahine is like our most quietest daughter. I mean, child. She's our only daughter, but most quiet child that we have. And so when she did bring up this court case and ended up being the main plaintiff, I was like kind of blown away that she was willing to go outside of her little shell to pursue this. So yeah.
Absolutely. And, you know, it's funny that you mentioned this, Summer, that she may be your quietest child, because really she's taking on something almost unfathomable. I couldn't imagine doing that at my age, Navahine. So it's incredible, especially as a law student now, watching you, you know, advocate for our lahui, as well as really be so stable in your identity as a Hawaiian, is truly inspiring to everybody older than you, and definitely everybody underneath you. And I know you didn't learn this yourself, and you kind of mentioned this already, but you know, if you can kind of elaborate a little bit more on, you know, what lessons of advocacy you've really learned from your makua, from your lahui, and where you think you're going to take that, especially in this case that you'll be bringing up.
I think that ever since I was little, my parents have taught me and my siblings how to really stand up for what we think is right. Mm-hmm. And that when you know something is wrong and when you carry responsibility, like in the situation that we're in now with the EV and fighting for something like the ʻAina, that you really should put in your all to stand against what's wrong. And when talk of the climate change lawsuit came up, I knew that it was my turn to stand up for what I knew was right. And I looked up to them and their examples that they set to really do what I needed to do.
Absolutely, Navahine. And, you know, I just got chills kind of hearing her say, like, I just knew what I needed to do. And, you know, they've all of our panelists have kind of talked about that feeling you're in your na'au to really, you know, take action when you feel like it's needed, and to really not only protect yourselves, but to protect your lahui, your ʻAina, because you know that, especially what Navahine just highlighted for us, is that it's not meant for us, it's meant for the generations that'll come after. And again, Navahine, so glad you're here. I'm truly inspired by the youth today. I wish I was that smart growing up, but you know, math got me, so whatever. And I think kind of to close before I open it up for the questions from the audience, which I see everybody is filling up in the chat, so mahalo nui for that. I guess what action, and this is for everybody, whoever wants to answer first, you know, what action do we need to take to leave a better world for our keiki? If you can, you know, pin it down to one thing. I know that's kind of a large question to ask. And I guess let's start back with ʻOhana Fukumitsu, if you folks are ready to answer that.
So being a mother, I realized, especially more recently, how important it is to fight for their rights or their natural resources, to like put in this effort so that when they're grown, the battle is maybe a little less taxing for them. So I think for the future, I do think it's this perspective that needs to change, that we don't see. We live in such a disposable world lately, and like I feel like people just look at like what they can accomplish in their one lifetime for themselves, and like just get caught up in the rat race. And I think when you kind of almost make yourself connected to all the generations, then you see it more like a long-term goal, that whatever you're doing now isn't even for just now, it's for 3 generations, 4 generations down the line. And if we all keep thinking that way, then we're just slowly getting to the place we need to be, I think, as a lahui. Because there's some things I know I won't be able to accomplish in my lifetime, but I do know our keiki will. So yeah, I think that change in perspective is important.
Yeah, I feel the same. Definitely the same. Yeah.
Mahalo nui, folks. Same question to you, Justyn, if you could kind of, especially from your perspective as a filmmaker, you know, like what actions do you want to take, or what actions do you want to see and really capture in your films that would be beneficial as a message for our keiki to understand?
I guess for me, it's like to be able to find joy in refining and reclaiming our identity as Kanaka. You know, for myself, like I didn't necessarily grow up the way Navahine and Kōlea folks did, you know, generationally rooted to one aina. You know, it wasn't until later in life that I learned more of, you know, my own cultural Hawaiian identity, Ōlelo Hawaii, those kinds of things. And a lot of it came from outside of family. And so I think if I'm thinking forward and bringing my own particular journey and the way I'd like to carry that forward is for myself to kind of continue that learning process. And I think for me, like the ability and the blessing to be able to tell stories like these and get to know folks like these only deepens my connection to that identity and to this place. And you know, I think for all of us, there's all different kinds of people and sources and kumu essentially in order to find those connections to yourself. And yeah, I guess it's just never stop that journey. And then how do I become more of that kumu that I didn't necessarily have for the generations that I bring into this world eventually.
Right on. Mahalo nui, Justyn. And Kumu, same question for you, but again, I have a little special twinge for you. What, I guess, if you could also kind of share how you can navigate through the emotional labor of this work. I know that you've been working in many of these different cases for you know, most of your career, and that you continue to really support the Lahui and our community like this. So I would love to hear how you really maintain your own spiritual and emotional health, especially as you take on such heavy and emotionally charged cases like this.
Yeah, for me, it's important to have like that spiritual foundation. And being from Molokai, my life was very much like Summer and Kōlea's life and how Navahine is being raised today. And one of our legacy on Molokai is Pule being strong and powerful in prayer, yeah. And being a child of the Aloha Aina movement from the 70s, what I witnessed throughout my life was a lot of miraculous things, that a lot of David and Goliath stories, you know. And I think the Aina will fight for you and the Kūpuna will fight for you when they see that you're making an effort to protect them. And on Molokai is like the spiritual element is so real. There's an immediate feedback loop, you know, in your actions. And so a lot of it is that pilina, is that understanding of ʻOhana, and that aina is your ʻOhana. You know, when the aina hurts, you hurt. But also when you do things to nurture the land, you're gonna feel that nurture is returned to you. You know, and as we look at leaving a better world for our keiki, you know, it's really about essentially taking care of your family. Because if you take care of your family, you have strong community, you have a strong lahui, and you have a peaceful world. So it all begins with what we infuse into our children, you know. And for me, I don't have children. I don't have living children, and so my keiki are Haumana like you, Tana, you know, and Amber was one of my haumana as well. And so I do everything that I can to pour my love into you guys and continue the things that I learned from my makua and kupuna. And the question I always ask myself, like, because I revere my kupuna, I ask myself, am I doing things that when my mo'opuna, you know, many generations from now will look back, would they say, I'm proud of my kupuna? You know, and so for me, it's always just doing whatever I can, you know, and just starting where I'm at from whatever my gifts are. You know, it's important that when we ask ourselves our kuleana, like we ask like, what gifts do we have to impart? And then we just start where we're at and have courage, you know, and courage also means just being part of even a small collective. You can have 5 crazy guys with the same pipe dream, you know, and you can actually affect amazing change. So it's just having that courage and knowing that your actions affect your mo'opuna not yet born. And, you know, when I look at Navahine and the climate change lawsuit, the basis of that lawsuit, you know, these are cases that are happening throughout the United States and being put forward by our Children's Trust. And the whole basis is that our generation and the guys before us are leaving a wasteland, are leaving a worse world than what we came into. And so it's these children that are saying, we have rights to a better future. And when we look specifically at Hawaii, it's actually the most compelling case because it's based on the public trust, and the public trust is a constitutional right. We have the most robust laws in the United States, if we see ourselves as part of the US. In that the public trust includes the aina, it includes the environment, and the public trust stems from all our relationship with aina and our Wahi, you know, and so the Fukumitsu ʻOhana actually epitomizes the whole public trust. It's the life of the maka'ainana, the life of the hoa'aina, and the pilina to aina. That is the basis of all Native Hawaiian rights, as well as the constitutional protections of the public trust. And so to have Navahine and our other keiki, some who are kanaka and some who are not, bring this lawsuit, it's phenomenal, and it's resetting us in understanding that we have kuleana to all our piko, you know, and that piko now is to our generations not born, our mo'opuna not yet born. And so if we understand that, then we will leave a better world for our keiki.
Mahalo nui kumu for closing out at least my portion of the Q&A. I would love to open this up for the audience. And I believe we have some in the chat. So I'm just gonna go and ask them in the order that they came in. So our first question is from Kiara. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. And I think for this question, I'll send it to the ʻOhana Fukumitsu, if that's okay, somewhere in Kōlea, as well as Navahine. Would you agree the return to our aina and iwi kupuna would be the return of our health and well-being?
Yes, I do think it would be. I think we've actually even experienced that and seen it for ourselves, you know. There's this connection that heals you, I think, and because for so long your ʻOhana has thrived in that area or in that ahupua'a, that when you return to it, I think it's a healing to your entire system. I think we all carry such intense generational trauma in our bones, you know, and we pass that on to our kids. And so I think when you heal yourself by connecting back to the land, it then, you know, heals you physically. So yes, I think I do believe that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
definitely. It goes like I said earlier. Definitely is hand in hand. You know, the Kanaka health has a lot to do with the Aina.
Absolutely. And Navahine, if you wanted to weigh in on this question for the audience.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I agree. Yeah, I agree with that.
Right on, right on. She concurs. She concurs. Mahalo nui ʻohana. And this next one came in on private chat. I know you guys can't see it, but I'm assuming it's for Justyn since it has film attached to it. But you know, what they're asking is, how does film in general, I guess, amplify the voices of our community? And where has this film been shown since it's released? If you kind of want to elaborate a little bit more, and please mention your many awards and accolades that you've received for the audience.
Mahalo for that question. I think, yeah, I think for me, film really is just a tool, you know, just like that slide, that Kaliʻuokapaʻakai slide that you guys had up earlier, right? Like all these different realms that we're advocating in, whether it's law or education or things like that. I think film is another tool, and it's a medium that is quite universal. You know, it's become something that, you know, if done right and done well, is easily palatable and universally connectable to people all over the world. Even a story as specific as protecting iwi kupuna in the ahupua'a of Hakipu'u. And for the film Pili Moʻo, it's been pretty awesome, the film festival journey that it's been on and continues to be on. We first played at the Hawaii International Film Festival this past November 2021, and then kind of had a world premiere of the entire Reciprocity Project at the Big Sky Film Festival in Montana. And from there, it's been selected to play at probably close to 30 film festivals around the world at this point, from Colombia to Norway to New York and DC, festivals in California. And then kind of recently, it screened at the Mauriland Film Festival in Aotearoa and won Best Short Documentary at that festival, which is really awesome. And I think that's also a testament to the fact that as specific as these stories are, they're universal elements that people around the world can relate to and connect to and learn from and resonate with and find meaning and connection for their own journeys. And
Absolutely.
and so it's still in its film festival journey, and you know, we continue to get notified of more festivals that it is being accepted at and screening at, and so it's really cool to see this story travel far and wide and be seen by such diverse audiences.
Right on. Mahalo nui, Justyn. And yes, as he just mentioned, this film is still in its run. I hope it never stops. I have a few friends that are, you know, filmmakers like you, and I can only imagine how hard it was to create this film, especially during the pandemic. So incredible. I'm glad it's doing awesome. I'm glad you're winning the awards that you deserve. And mahalo for sharing that. The next question that I'm seeing on the screen is, what piece of advice would you give to other families who are dealing with similar issues in terms of reclaiming / protecting their ancestral lands? And this one I might point back to Malia, if you could answer that for the audience.
I think, you know, taking kind of a direction from one of our most beloved Aloha Aina, George Helm from Molokai. You know, one of the things he told us is like, there's no excuse, you know, you gotta do your homework. And so a lot of times, you know, we get caught unawares of an issue until it's already spiraling out of control, until somebody is like putting the blade to the dirt and destroying our Wahi kapu and our iwi kupuna. And so it's important to be vigilant, whether it's different permits coming up down the pike, it's showing up to these very unsexy events called meetings. You know, a lot of us get meeting-itis, especially with Zoom, but yeah, you gotta do the unsexy stuff, show up at meetings and find out who's the experts, you know, like Summer and Kōlea were showing in the Naholowaʻa film. Like, we just have to call people and figure out, you know, call Department of Planning and then call State Historic Preservation Division. Phone a friend, you know, Lifeline, you know. Sometimes I hate telling people I'm a lawyer because I get plenty phone a friends, you know. Lifeline to plenty people, but know your resources, you know, your people, the people that know something or somebody you know who knows somebody else, you know. It's the coconut wireless, and now it's faster with social media, but it's also like not being afraid. Because a lot of times, you know, especially developers, they try to divide and conquer. They try to throw you off your game and make you feel like you're stupid. And so you gotta kind of throw your chest out there and make what? You know, no scared, flex the chest a little bit. You know, no scare them, go get them. Be fearless and do your homework. That's what I would say.
Right on, Kumu. Thank you so much. And I think that's my new favorite word, the unsexy work of it all. But you're right. You know, you do have to be really courageous. And as unsexy as the work can get, Kumu is also correct in saying that there are resources for you. There are people for you to talk to. Maybe don't bother Kumulia. She seems a little inundated with a lot of work, but you know, she's still available when she can be. And with that, more questions are coming in. Right on. Thank you. Please continue to send questions, whoever you want. And this one is again from Kiara, but how does one start with their genealogy? Oh, sorry. How does one start with their genealogy? What are sites you recommend? And I guess this is open for anybody who wants to take it.
I think this one is for the collective, because I think there's amazing researchers who can answer this question.
Sure. I guess if I can see Kaliʻuokapaʻakai is available. Kelly, if you want to tap into the panel.
Yeah, I was actually going to tap into Amber, our kind of tech wizard here that has created our website, because I know we've uploaded a ton of resources on our website. We also do training programs and internship programs and community workshops. And over the past couple of years, because of COVID, we've shifted to a lot of online workshops. And with that, we can record them and put them on our website. So I know in terms of our Malama Iwi Kūpuna workshops, we were sponsored by the Office of Foreign Affairs a couple years back to run a number, I think a 6-part series in many different aspects of Malama Iwi Kūpuna. And it started off with actually Moʻoku Auhau Aina and Moʻoku Auhau ʻOhana. So resources to go about looking up the genealogy of your ancestors, as well as the genealogy of where your ancestors come from. And then it led also to just other aspects of this type of work with the laws, state and federal, as well as just talking about some of the history of what has been going on with just caring for our kupuna over the past few decades. So there's a lot of resources. I think it's, and maybe I'll turn it over to you, Amber. I think it's on our Kūleaʻapaʻa website for sure. And maybe we can drop a link. There we go, mahalo, Amber. And I think it might be on our Kaliʻuokapaʻakai website as well. But you feel free to start there. And I was also going to mention, when someone asked the Ninau about just help, and Malia's like, phone a friend. The collective is here to kind of be that support network as well. We have a lot of expertise in many different realms as part of the Kaliʻuokapaʻakai Collective. So when we get emails through our website, we kind of just shoot it off to the different people that can kako'o in those areas. So feel free to reach out to us as well if you need specific support. Mahalo.
Right. Mahalo, Kelly, for jumping in. And yes, please feel free to click on that link. We will also be sending out, and we'll mention this again at the close, but we'll also be sending out some contact information for everybody if you guys want to get more involved. And speaking of involvement, I see which may be our last question, and so we can keep with our time, from Hi'iaka. And this one is, how can the Lahui and general community kako'o and kokua you folks now and in the future? And this is open for everybody. And we'll start with ʻOhana Fukumitsu.
Aloha. Well, I think for our ʻOhana specifically, currently we are in a pretty difficult situation with the Spartan race coming up and it running through our historic sites and our sacred sites. I think supporting our ʻOhana by maybe contacting these Spartan race directors, the landowner who's Kūpuna Ranch, and I think just support for our ʻOhana would be awesome to try to get through this. The Spartan race is already next weekend, but it's been a long time that the Spartan race has been going through our ahupua'a and destroying historic and sacred sites. I think at least for the last 4 years. They go directly through our spring, they go through Puʻakeaheo, and they build large obstacle courses in those areas. And so that's currently, I feel like the journey we're on never ends. There's always something else, and I feel like a lot of times we just get so overwhelmed by trying to fix and find the resources to fix all of these issues that just keep building up, like right now there's the Spartan race, but there's also an issue with our spring being diverted and being used and not shared with the rest of the kuleana owners who are actually still farming today. So a lot of our ʻOhanas on our road that farm, they don't have water anymore because the spring is completely being diverted. So there's so many things. So I think supporting our ʻOhana, I think that's a big part of it. And hopefully by next weekend, if something has to be happening to like protect those sites, then I hope we can call on different families to stand with us or support us. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mahalo nui for sharing. And yes, I believe you folks said the Spartan race is happening next week. And so I guess in general, what I'm hearing is there's going to be help needed. So for those of you that are itching to get involved, here's your opportunity. I believe, and Kumulia, you can kind of touch on this more, but I believe there's a need for legal observers. And well, I'll just let Kumulia elaborate on that more, if you can kind of finish up.
I believe summer folks are reaching out to Hawaiian community to assist in being cultural monitors at the race, and it is likely some may be arrested because Kūpuna Ranch is stating that they don't want the whole Aina to access the land during the race, but they will be exercising their right to malama their wahi, so there may be arrests. And just like on Mauna Kea, there were legal observers. There are people culturally monitoring what was going on. So I believe, within this next week leading up to the race, the Fukumitsu ʻOhana and the Hakipu'u families will be organizing themselves to take that stand. So it may get a little hairy. So I'm not sure how. I think in the protecthakipu'u.org website, there's ways to contact that organization or that hui of families. So that might be a way to kind of volunteer as, you know, the organizing efforts take better shape. There's also the Kahalu'u Neighborhood Board. They meet monthly. And so on the agenda was this Spartan race and impact to to the cultural sites in Hakipu generally. So the thing that is also happening with Kualoa Ranch is they have this, I think, secret island it's called, like they're really messing up the fish pond, Moli'i pond, you know, plugging up the makaha in order to keep the water height and bring in tourists. That's, you know, the circulation is such that it's forming some kind of sandbar. And so they keep doing these kind of tours and stuff. So that site is turning into Waikiki, and it's all conservation lands and historic property. So I don't understand how they're able to continue these kinds of activities. There's also, you know, Chinamin's had kayaking, and we're finding out that this is conservation lands and they have no conservation district use permits. So these are mainland companies that are running these things without permits. So I think at some point we have to organize to protest against these things and protect these spaces. So I think that is some way to be involved and put a spotlight on the issues happening there. And what I've emphasized in the Kahalu'u Neighborhood Board is that we're not a museum culture. We're not just protecting sites, we're protecting a way of life, we're protecting our living culture. If you got taro terraces that are being messed up in Springs and Heiau, you know, people in Hakipu still have a pilina to these things, and they utilize them for their spiritual and physical sustenance. So it's important that I think in the long run, we do a whole management plan and emphasize also to Kualoa Ranch, which does not have an understanding of Native rights. You cannot block Hawaiʻana from accessing their ahupua'a. You know, so there's a lot of things like, well, let me see if I give you permission to go up and malama the spring or gather the things you need to feed yourself. So there are things happening, you know, from this missionary family that's been kind of terrorizing the families and doing all this illegal adverse possession kind of stuff and stealing Kūlea on the lands, that we have to hold them accountable for. So it requires not just a small amount of families in Hakipu, but it requires the Lahui to get behind them, just like how we got behind Mauna Kea and other efforts.
Mahalo, Kumu. And there's action happening, there's action that should happen, that's action that could happen. And really, I think the underlying theme, and this is something that Kumu had mentioned earlier, is that our pilina to our ainam is what informs our Native Hawaiian rights, you know? So if we continue to push those rights forward, if we continue to really showcase our pilina to our aina, to our culture as a whole, that's what builds hope. That's where movement starts to happen. And I'm sure Kumu Malia will be at the front of the charge along with ʻOhana Fukumitsu in the near future. Same question for you, Justyn, but I do want to kind of morph it to kind of ask you a little bit more on like different projects that could be coming up. How can we support you with the existing projects now and anything that could be coming forth, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, mahalo for that. I guess, yeah, it's a really cool time. I think there's a growing community of Native Hawaiian filmmakers that are starting to expand into some pretty awesome spaces in terms of filmmaking and storytelling. For most of our history, the last several decades, a lot of the films that come out of Hawaii and that come out of Native Hawaiian filmmakers are documentaries, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's an important space for that. But what's really cool, I believe, is that there's more resource and also technical skill being put to creating scripted films. A lot of short films coming out now, and I think soon a lot more full-length movies will be coming out from this community of filmmakers. And so, yeah, I would say, you know, we get to know who these people are, like follow them online, follow their work. You know, the general life of movies, both short films and feature films, is usually after they get made, they're submitted to film festivals and so hopefully selected to some. So promote, you know, if you know people in those places that they're screening, you know, help push and promote those screenings. And then, you know, the ideal circumstances for the film to get seen and bought by a distributor at a film festival that can then be I guess expanded in much wider in terms of getting a hopefully theatrical release or like streaming release with platforms like Netflix or Hulu and things like that. And so I think on our end, we're really pushing to bring our indigenous stories more into these mainstream spaces because I think it's needed. And I think what's really cool is that the world and the industry seems to be at a place where they're hungry for these stories that haven't been told in a mainstream scale yet. And so, yeah, I think just get to know who these filmmakers are in our community and the projects they're working on. The Hawaii International Film Festival happens every November, so it's coming up again. And there's a growing number of Hawaii-made and Native Hawaiian-made films every year that seems to be coming out. So, you know, buy tickets to go see it, support that way. You know, I have projects coming out at HIF, scripted shorts and things like that. And so, yeah, I think it's just a matter of if you love it and you want more of it, spread it, watch it, share it.
Mahalo, Justyn. Thank you very much. And if you could go ahead and maybe drop some of your social media links or any websites that you have for the audience so that they can keep up with you and your many amazing projects. And I also kind of want to mention, you know, how refreshing it is to hear you support other fellow filmmakers and fellow Native Hawaiian artists at that point. It's, you know, I think the fields that we end up working in can get a little competitive and a little cutthroat, but it's nice to know that you're still holding on to that Hawaiian value of really supporting your community. So right on, thank you very much. And last but not least, Navahine, I did not forget about you. If you could kind of explain to the audience like what we could be doing to support you as you know, continue on in your endeavors and your actions. You know, do you need people sitting in your classes while you're at court? Do you need people taking notes for you? No, just kidding. But whatever we can do to support you if you want to, you know, elaborate a little bit more for the audience.
So the court case I'm involved in is really just to spread awareness and help hold people accountable for their actions. So I think just spreading the word around about the case and what it's really about would really help support the case.
Absolutely. And again, Navahine, I guess at this point, it's really just me fangirling a little, but mahalo again for taking on this, this very important step. And I'm excited to see how this plays out, especially as a law student. I'll be tracking it as best as I can through the channels that I got. So whatever I can do to support you, whatever we can do to support you, just let us know. And with that, I will close out and say mahalo nui to our panelists and mahalo nui to you folks as our audience. Before I fully close though, is there anything I'm missing, Amber or Kelly, Ma? Nope, all good to go. Okay, well, mahalo again, Malia, mahalo again, ʻOhana Fukumitsu, and mahalo again, Justyn, for being here, for sharing space with us, and for letting us hear your story and to experience your work. I think looking ahead, sorry, I'm trying to open up my notes now, but of course, the Wi-Fi on Maui doesn't want to work with me. Okay, so mahalo nui again. We also want to mahalo our supporters and our contributors for this evening, Huliawa Pa'a, Kamehameha Schools, and the Network for Landscape Conservation and NAGPRA. After this closes, Amber will now be sharing a post survey in the chat. And we kindly ask that you folks take a few minutes to fill it out and share your mana'o with us. And as a follow-up for tonight's for the evening's discussion, Amber will be emailing all of our attendees here the beginning of next week's with different resources and our contact information that we had discussed throughout the panela tonight. And with that, I mahalo nui everybody again. If you are still at home, still listening, please give a big round of applause for our panelists. Just me, fun. I'll clap louder. Mahalo nui everybody.
Mahalo.
And for our panelists, if you could stay on, for the rest of everybody, mahalo for joining us. You are free to leave.